Linn,
Wait,
you want
wait.
to go ahead and connect us?
Let me start getting everything going.
You do your thing.
Okay, we're all okay. Now you can go.
All right, so we're recording and it's on. I've got 6:07 p.m. Let's call the meeting to order for the Historic Review Board, March 1st special meeting. First item is our roll call. John, or probably Lynn, whoever wants to do the roll call.
Chair Schreiber.
I'm here.
Member Taylor. Member Taylor. Okay, we'll go back to, we'll start with Member Owens. Chris Owens.
Here.
Member Manning, James Manning.
Present.
Member Steele, John Steele.
Present.
Member Scott Irwin.
Present.
Member Tom Watton.
Present.
Member David Taylor.
Here.
Okay. Staff Liaison John Floyd.
Present.
And City Attorney Bill Monahan.
Present.
And if the applicant team would like to introduce themselves.
I'm Jessica Iceland. I'm the architect on the project.
I'm John Stromquist, one of the owners of the project.
And I'm Kristen Tour. I am also one of the owners on the project.
And Mary Brennock, one of the co-owners.
Okay, Chair Schreiber.
Yep, I think we can move on. So our next item is public comment related to land use items not on the agenda. Do we have any public comments? Lynn or John?
Candace Scott, do you have any comments that are not on the agenda? Oops, sorry.
I do not. Sorry, I was muted.
Okay, all right. Debbie Ladroot, do you have any comments not on the not related to the food cart? Debbie?
She's probably trying to unmute.
Yeah. Jody Carson, do you have any comments?
Oh, my comments are on the application.
All right, thank you. Kristen Senior, do you have any comments? Kristen? Kristen, do you have any comments?
I'm trying, let's see here.
We can hear you now, yeah. Do you have any comments that are not related to the food cart? Oh, she. Kristen Senior, do you have any comments not related to the food cart? Okay. Rebecca Hollenbach, do you have any comments not related to the food cart?
No, mine are related to the agenda.
Thank you. Teresa Gonzalez, any comments not related to the food cart?
No.
Okay, all right.
Okay. So therefore, there's no public comment related to anything outside of the items on the agenda. So we'll move on to the approval of our draft minute notes for January 18th, 2022. Those were attached in the email from John. Hopefully the board had a chance to reread those. Any comments from the board on the draft meeting notes from January's meeting? No comments. So I'm looking for a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
That's James Manning making the motion to approve.
Second.
I was looking down. Who seconded? Oh, John. Okay, good. All right. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor of approving the minutes for January 18th, 2022, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we passed the minutes for January 18th meeting. Next on our agenda is the public hearing for the Willamette Garage Class 1 Design Review, known as DR 2111, alterations of a non-conforming structure and a sign permit. So we will switch over to my script provided by John. Thank you for that. And we'll run through this. So a good evening tonight. We are holding a public hearing for application DR 2111 miscellaneous 21-14 and SGN 2120 for recommendation to the Planning Commission regarding a Class 1 design review and alteration of a non-conforming structure at 1590 Willamette Falls Drive. This is a quasi-judicial hearing decision. Unlike a legislative hearing where personal opinion may come into play, this quasi-judicial ruling must be grounded in relevant code. If the application meets the code, the board must recommend approval. The hearing will proceed as follows. After the preliminary legal matters, staff will make a presentation, followed by the applicant's presentation. Then any members of the public who wish to comment on the application will be given the opportunity. Finally, there will be time for the applicant rebuttal. The applicant will have 20 minutes initially, plus 10 minutes for rebuttal. As instructed in the notice of hearing and meeting agenda, those wishing to testify at this hearing should have completed a speaker sign-up form before noon today. For members of the public who missed the speaker sign-up deadline but would like to speak on this item, please complete the web form linked in the agenda and notice of hearing. Staff will send you a link as time allows. Board members may ask questions of the applicant, staff, or anyone who testifies. Remember to use your hand icon if you wish to ask questions. That's in the WebEx application. Please keep yourself on mute until you are ready to speak so everyone can be heard clearly. Now I call to order the public hearing. I don't have a gavel, but we'll do a pretend gavel. Our gavel's up at City Hall. Now I ask the city attorney to cover the preliminary legal matters.
Thank you, Chair Schreiber. So the applicant has the burden of proving that the application is consistent with the applicable criteria of the City of West Lynn's Community Development Code. The criteria that must be addressed in this hearing are Chapter 58 of the Willamette Falls Drive Commercial Design District. Any testimony, argument, or evidence that speakers give us must be directed to the applicable code criteria or some other community development code criteria that the speaker believes should apply to this decision. So if someone raises an issue that's not under Chapter 58, it's their burden to identify where in the community development code that additional issue or criteria exists. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to allow the Historic Review Board and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. And we know that the recommendation of the HRB will go on to the Planning Commission, so there'll be a further hearing. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the city or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. So I'm going to go through three different challenge areas. The first is, does any member of the Historic Review Board wish to declare a potential or actual conflict of interest or bias? So there's two issues there, conflict of interest and bias. Does anyone wish to make a declaration? I'm not seeing any. So the next question is, does any member of the Historic Review Board wish to report any site visits or ex parte contacts related to this application? Chair Schreiber?
I drive by that location 3 or 4 times a day, picking kids up from school back and forth. So I've seen that site many times, but never under the auspices of this and never looking at it beyond just driving by.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Also, Scott Irwin has his hand up.
Okay.
Yes.
Commissioner Irwin?
Yeah, Mary Brannock contacted me on LinkedIn. She advised me that she's a member of the applicant entity and wanted to introduce herself. So once I knew that was her and this hearing would be coming up, I responded letting her know that I do look forward to the HRB hearing on this matter, and then I ceased communication with her. There has been no other communication.
Okay, thank you for that declaration. Anyone else on the board? Okay, thank you. So with that, this is a little more difficult. We're going to need to utilize the raised hand feature, or perhaps Lynn can help me out if there's another method. These are the opportunities for challenges to be made to the Historic Review Board. First is, does any member of the audience wish to challenge the jurisdiction of the Historic Review Board to hear this matter?
Candace Scott? Candace Scott, do you have any challenges?
No.
Thank you. Debbie Ladrout, do you have any challenges?
No.
Thank you. Jody Carson, do you have any challenges?
No.
Thank you. Rebecca Hollenbrook, do you have any challenges? Rebecca Hollenbeck?
No.
Thank you. Teresa Gonzalez, do you have any challenges?
No. No.
Thank you. No challenges.
Thank you. So the next issue is specific to members of the board. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the impartiality or ex parte disclosures of any member of the Historic Review Board on this matter? And again, Lynn, I would request your assistance.
All right, we'll unmute the attendees again. Candace Scott. Do you have any challenges, Candace?
No.
Thank you. Debbie?
No.
Thank you. Jody Carson?
No.
Thank you. Rebecca Hollenbeck?
No.
Thank you. Teresa Gonzalez? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Teresa.
Oh, I'm sorry. What did you ask?
Do you have any challenges?
I have none. No.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank
Mr.
you, Lynn.
Moran.
Thank you, Lynn. So with that, there are no challenges to the jurisdiction of the Historic Review Board, nor to the participation of any members of the board. So with that, Chair Schreiber, I suggest that this concludes the legal matters, and I turn the meeting back over to you. And I'm here, by the way, for the members of the board, should you have any questions throughout this process.
Thank you, Council. So let's proceed then with the staff presentation. John Floyd.
Yes, thank you, Chair Schreiber. Let me just pull my my presentation up here. So can let's see here. Apologies here. Okay, can everyone see my my opening slide?
Yes.
I can see it.
Great, thank you. Okay, so for the record, my name is John Floyd, Social Planner with the City of Westland Planning Department, and we're here to talk about the Willamette Garage Adaptive Reuse Project located at 1590 Willamette Falls Drive. So this is a pretty unusual application for the city, so there hasn't been sort of recent precedent for this. So if any questions arise during my presentation, feel free to interrupt me. I'm happy to sort of answer them as they come up from the board. And so I'll just kind of keep this at a high level. The applicant will also want to present their materials. And if you want me to dive deeper on something, happy to do so.
John, just for clarification, why don't we have you finish your presentation first, and then we can have the board address questions, just so we
Sure.
can also stick to the script.
Okay, that works for me. So, okay. Okay, here we go. Okay, so as noted in the staff report, this proposal is actually three separate applications combined into a single request, and all three are being processed concurrently, considered and reviewed concurrently. Normally, a Class 1 design review would be approved by the planning director. However, because the proposal also requires approval of alteration to a non-conforming commercial building, it therefore gets bumped to the Planning Commission for their consideration. Chapter 99 of the Community Development Code requires that any design review applications within the Willamette Falls Drive Commercial Design District must be reviewed by the Historic Review Board for recommendation to the Approval Authority, which is why we're here tonight. In my presentation, I'm going to be referencing the sort of facts and findings contained in my staff report, distributed to the Historic Review Board on February 18th. So, and then also too, I just want to call out while I have the audience here, one additional comment letter came in after publication and was distributed to the HRB and placed on our website around noon today as well. So just to start out, the Willamette Falls Drive Commercial Design District was created circa 1992. It roughly extends from 10th Street in the east to 15th Street on the west. And the project site is noted in the red star on the screen here. Forms the westernmost point of the design district. It's almost an outlier parcel. And so, however, this site has been within the boundaries of the district since its creation 30 years ago. The overall purpose of the district is to support the rehabilitation and revitalization of the Main Street area, and to do so in a way that's compatible with the historic district located sort of to the southeast of the project site. The required design aesthetic of the design district is that of Western false front architecture from the turn of the last century. That's meant to complement the predominant architectural styles in the historic district, which roughly overlaps in the area between 13th and 14th Street. So, and that said, the nearest historic structure on Willamette Falls Drive to the project site is the church, approximately 1 block east of the gas station. So the zoning of the site is general commercial. That's generally consistent with that of the Main Street area along Willamette Falls Drive, and it does form the sort of western boundary of the general commercial district. The commercial zoning does sort of extend westerly. The rest of the block between Dollar and 16th is zoned mixed use on both sides. So the comprehensive plan and the zoning map anticipate continued commercial development on this block. And so so the proposal is generally in keeping with the overall vision of those documents. There is residential zoning adjacent to the site. To the north is R10 zoning and contains single family homes. And then across Dollar Street to the east are apartments, and those are zoned to R2.1. So there's a bit of a mishmash of zoning here, but generally in this area, both sides of Willamette Falls Drive are expected to be commercial in nature. So here's a photograph of the site just a couple of weeks ago. The site is about a 1/4 acre in size and contains 2 vacant structures. It's formerly used as a gas station and a auto repair facility. The front building is a fuel canopy. The rear building is the automotive repair center with a bathroom and office/retail space. As noted before, it's been vacant for a while, and there's some deferred maintenance on the building, so it needs some TLC. There has been some remediation of contaminants on site, and in June of last year, the Oregon DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality, issued a no further action letter on the site, meaning it's safe basically to conduct business on there. One thing to note is that since the site was last used for commercial activity, The Willamette Falls Drive streetscape enhancement project has occurred and created a much wider side and created a sidewalk where none existed, and then also created on-street parking along this street frontage as well. It's also the site previously had direct access onto both Dollar Street and Willamette Falls Drive, and as a result of the streetscape project, vehicle access is now restricted to the Dollar Street frontage, and there's now continuous parking in front of the project site. So the proposed project, as described in the application materials and staff report presented to you, is essentially for the conversion of a 50-year-old gas station and garage to an eating and drinking establishment. This is a permitted use in the general commercial zone and does not require any special or conditional review. The primary changes to the rear building, the service building, include new roll-up doors, new storefront entries, the addition of new bathrooms, access doors, and a new overall color scheme. Also on site, the applicant's proposing construction of a new walk-in cooler, a waste enclosure, a decorative perimeter fence, and landscaping as well. Also, the existing paved area on site, previously used for vehicle circulation and parking, is to be used for mobile food units, which is the state legal term for food carts, and outdoor seating as shown on the site plan. So here's a copy of the site plan. It's probably a little hard to read on your screens, but essentially the fuel canopy is going to be converted to cover for outdoor seating area. This is sheet A1.0 of the project plans. In terms of enclosing the site, there's a new 3-foot high fence proposed to sort of help define the public and private space. As noted before, there are 8 food carts, 5 on the west side, 3 on the east side. The walk-in cooler and trash enclosure on the northeast corner of the site, sort of adjacent to Dollar Street for easy access by waste haulers. Also, too, no frontage improvements are required along Dollar Street. The limited alterations being proposed do not reach the threshold of requiring the applicant to construct street and sidewalk improvements along Dollar Street. So just wanted to make that clear for the record. Here are proposed elevations as shown in sheet A2.1 of the application. As you can see, the overall shape and form of the buildings is not being changed. The proposed changes include new roll-up doors, new storefront entry there along the street facing the Willamette Falls Drive street facing side, as well as the sort of westerly side of the building. The former pump stations are being replaced with new permanent dining counters for customers of the site. And in terms of material changes, the applicant wishes to remove the false stone veneer on the building and replace it with a combination of metal and fiber cement siding. Also, other changes include new lighting fixtures and a new paint scheme as well. So here are just some of the proposed materials and colors contained in the application materials presented to you tonight. So getting to Chapter 58 of the Community Development Code, which is the Willamette Falls Drive Commercial Design District. While the staff report presented to you includes findings for all the applicable criteria that the Planning Commission will have to consider when they take this up in a few weeks, the role of the HRB is really to make a recommendation based on Chapter 58. However, staff wanted to provide all the facts and findings just so you had a overall context for the application, and in some cases they may interrelate. So we just wanted to present that for you. So the existing building does make for a difficult conversion to the Western false front style. This is because of a number of factors. One is just how the buildings are currently set on site and designed. They're really, the design aesthetic and form really are based on a technology and commercial model that just did not exist 140 years ago. So, and it would be very difficult to change the building to give an appearance of a Western false front building that requires a zero setback, a much higher front facade, and then other sort of period design details that conflict with a building that has a sort of mid-century style that has its own story and architectural integrity, and does have meaning to the community. So I think, as mentioned before, the changes to the building really are limited in nature, and the closest example we can point to for this application is the youth music project on the far other side and edge of on the other edge of the commercial design district. In that, in both circumstances, we have buildings that predated the design district. They have their own remaining utility and design aesthetic, and they just could not be reasonably converted to the Western false front architecture without really complete demolition or resulting in some sort of awkward conversion. So anyways, you'll find the findings for compliance with Chapter 58 in staff findings 29 through 63 of the staff report. Okay, one thing I do want to touch on are the mobile food units, aka the food carts. So these technically do not require review by the HRB, but they are sort of part of the project. They are regulated as vehicles by the state, and they're licensed and inspected at the local level through county health departments. As I understand it, even though some food carts move around across county lines, wherever they overnight tends to be where they're licensed in. So if they overnight in West Linn, they would be regulated by Clackamas County. If they overnighted in Beaverton, they would be regulated by Washington County Environmental Health. The activity conducted by food carts generally falls within the CDC definition of eating and drinking establishment, which is a permitted use in this district. And so essentially they're like vehicles just being parked on site by the applicant. One thing to note is that the applicant is proposing the installation of RV style hookups to increase safety and sanitation, which would, other sites have like above ground storage tanks or things like that, which can cause sanitation problems. And that's not the case in this project. So just wanted to touch on that. In terms of public comments, 4 have been submitted. There was one letter of support by Shannon Knight, I should say email, that came in. TVF&R did review the application and provided a letter stating that they found access and water supply sufficient. Their nearest station is only a couple blocks away, so their response time should be pretty quick to the site. The only request they had was that premises identification, namely the building numbers, be prominent, and that's something that's taken care of through normal building permit review. There were 2 letters expressing concern or opposition to the project. Generally, I can sum these up as concern for parking, concern for noise and general commotion, and overall aesthetic concerns about the site. One thing to note and discuss in the staff report is that properties within the Willamette Falls Drive commercial design district are exempt from minimum parking requirements. It just does not, the idea is to create a walkable commercial center, and also the addition of large parking lots runs counter to the historic design aesthetic required by the sort of Western false front architecture, is that you can't really have both at the same time. And so this project being within the design district is not required to provide on-site parking. And that's a code standard. In terms of noise and general commotion, I did want to talk about some of the other regulations that will kick in when this project is, if this project is approved, and it really applies to any other eating and drinking establishment in this area or the city generally. One is that the city does have a noise ordinance that does control noise emitted by land uses in the city. We also have a sidewalk cafe program. So basically, any sort of seating within the public right of way is regulated by the city to make sure that that people's desires to sit outside do not conflict with the need for an accessible pedestrian path down the sidewalk as well. Also, to have liquor served on site, which I understand will be OLCC will be involved and review the site for compliance with their standards. And then also, I believe there are questions about emissions from the vehicles and things like that. One thing just to remind the HRB is that mobile food units are essentially mobile licensed commercial kitchens and are subject to initial and ongoing inspections to make sure they meet health and safety standards. So those are ongoing. One other thing I wanted to talk about is the effect of the streetscape improvements. Is that I understand some people are concerned about the adequacy of parking, and even though it's not a code standard, I did want to point out that the recent streetscape improvements have actually created on-street parking on this block. Previous to them, there was no striped, compliant on-street parking on this block. However, the site here is noted with a red star there. You'll notice that there's no sidewalk or curbing there. Post-project, there is striped parking all along this block face here. So even though it's not a standard, the city has invested money here and actually created parking in this area. And so I think with that, I'm going to conclude my sort of brief presentation and turn it over to questions. So thank you.
All right, so any questions from the board for John? I have one to start off with, actually, John.
Yes.
Just from clarification, and maybe the applicant will answer this too. The new walk-in cooler,
Yes.
is that an actual structure they're building? This is going to be a permanent structure that's being added exterior?
I'll let the applicant talk about the actual construction of that. So.
And same with the waste enclosure. At least from the plans, it looks like it's an additional.
Yeah, that's a masonry enclosure for the waste.
Okay, and both of those will be visible by both streets, by Willamette Falls Drive and Dollar.
Correct. They will be visible from the street. So. And
then it says, you also mentioned they're building a fence. Is that also visible from the street, or where's the fence?
That's correct. And the applicant may want to speak more about the details there. On the site plan, it's noted that there's a 3-foot fence up along the property line, along Willamette Falls Drive and I believe Dollar Street. Along Willamette Falls Drive, it's behind a 3-foot planter, and so it's create a sense of enclosure, probably also to comply with OLCC requirements. But I'll let the applicant discuss that in greater detail.
Also leads me to my next question for you is, on the staff report, it said there's no planters, so that part of the code doesn't apply. But you just identified a 3-foot planter, and their maps look like there's planters all over the place, which is very much prohibited strictly by just saying in the code, no planters.
Okay.
So how do we work that out?
Let me look up that. Let me check out that criteria, and if you want to hold that till after the after the applicant's presentation, I can report back after that. Yeah.
I just saw that discrepancy from your report to what the applicant had put in there, so I just didn't know if that had changed something.
Let me look that up. I will respond momentarily.
Yep. And I'll just bring to the board, I know you mentioned Youth Music Project as one of the other applicants that has a precedent to this. Another one that we actually just dealt with recently, board members, was the Willamette Methodist Church and their change to the exterior of the building. And that did not kick in things like 0 lot lines and all of those kind of code things. So that is another precedent. It was, that happened probably, I don't know, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I can't remember when we approved that one, but That's another, although that is a historic structure, but it's still, it's non-conforming. It does not have a western false front, and it's not a facade, and it's not zero lot line.
Thank you.
It looks like John Steele has a question.
Yeah, this might be a question more for the applicant, and has to do with what the expected traffic, daily traffic, talking people, not cars here, to the facility, and if they have some sort of estimate by hour and what their actual hours of operation are planned to be. Those actually sound more like applicant questions than planner questions. So I think I answered that part of my question right off. But definitely on traffic count and the load, if they have an estimated load per hour, and maybe more later. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. I will defer to the applicant on that, and so for their estimates.
Any other questions for John from the board on any of his presentation? And obviously, not just what he said, but also was written up in the staff report as well. I don't see any other hands. All right, so then let's proceed with the applicant's presentation, and that'll be initial application 20 minutes for that. I've watched the clock.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Let me see if I can get the screen here. Can you see that okay?
Yep.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to come and talk to you tonight. We are just, myself and Chris and John are just thrilled with the opportunity to create something unique for the environment. And I hope at the end of this that you'll come to the Willamette Garage and you'll be as excited as we are about this project. I thought I'd just give you a quick overview of who we are, and each of us will take a moment to talk about ourselves. But so Mary Brunnock, I've moved to West Linn in 2001. Raised both of my kids here. They've gone through the public school. One's at Oregon State, one's at University of Oregon. And I myself have had a career in high tech, and right now work for a software company. But the reason I decided to invest in West Linn and invest in this project for a couple of reasons. One is, of course, I got to work with these great people. Chris Tour and I had just completed a project during COVID, and I found that experience to be very fun, and really liked working with Chris, and now have this great opportunity to work with John. So that was one of the things. The second is I really like the idea of creating something for the community. I'm a huge fan of West Linn. I love all the things that we've done on Willamette Falls Drive and the uniqueness of the city that we have. So the opportunity to invest in that and create a unique setting for our neighbors, our friends from near and far was, you know, just something I couldn't pass up. And then I'd also say the last thing is I'm a fun lover, and I just think this has been a fun project so far, and I think we'll just be creating a fun environment for the community. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Hi, I am Chris Tour. I have lived in West Linn for 35 years. I live just a few blocks from the gas station, so I am lucky enough to drive out of my street and look straight at the gas station every time I leave my house. We live in the house that my husband's grandparents lived in. So my husband has lived here his entire life, and his grandparents lived here. I think they moved here in 1935. He actually worked at the gas station when he was in high school, and he has family ties to Clem Dollar, who at one time was one of the owners of the gas station. So we have a lot of history here. Raised my kids here. I think I'm one of Westland's top salespeople. I just think this is the best place to raise a family. And I also kind of know what we've been missing. And there's just kind of always been some things like, I wish we had this, or I wish there was that. And one of them was a great community gathering place, a place where we could have soccer parties, you know, at the end of the year, team parties, just a bigger space for gatherings. And I've always, in the back of my mind, I've always been thinking about this gas station. What am I going to do with this someday? So one day on my morning walk, I saw that there was a for sale sign on there. And I know a little bit of the history of the owner. And I called my friend Mary. I said, Mary, the gas station's for sale. Let's buy it. And Mary, to my surprise, said, yeah, let's do it. And then John is also my neighbor. And I said, we need one more person. We need somebody who's good with money. And that would be John. That would not be me. And so we had John as our third partner, and we made an offer, and they accepted our offer. And we are all like, okay, now what? Now what do we do? But we all had a really good vision. We had great ideas. We spent hours. John spent hours working through the DEQ, making sure all of that was safe. Mary and I spent hours looking at other food carts. What can we do to make this better, to make it safer, to make it cleaner, neater? And I just think that we have a great project. And when you see the rest of the presentation, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised. So that is a little bit about me. And then Mary, we can introduce John.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Okay, thanks guys for having us. My name is John Stromquist. I am also a local resident in West Linn. I actually live across the street from Chris, as she mentioned. We're on the historic registry with the house that I live in on 15th as well. So I'm kind of used to that. I went to West Linn High School, graduated in 1990. So actually moved back here a few years ago. I have a little daughter who's 8 years old that goes to the elementary school. So have some deep roots in the community. I'm a finance manager, so I actually have a day job. I work in Wilsonville, so I commute. So I drive by that gas station and have been for years, right? And I always wanted to do something with it. I kind of loved the potential in it. And when it became available for sale, that's kind of when we all joined up and decided to buy it. So we're really excited. We believe we're making a great investment in the community. We think we can do something very special on that site. Yeah, it's a little different, but I think, the world is calling for something different these days. The outdoor venue, I think, is great. We're going through the pandemic, coming out the other side, but still everybody needs some space. So we like the outdoor features. But yeah, just really excited to be here and talk to you about the project, and deep roots here in West Linn, and just want to see something special for the community.
Great, thanks, John. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of who we are and how we came together. But just to talk a little bit more about our vision for the garage, we're not looking at this as a drinking establishment. We're really looking at it as a fun environment for families. We know there's tons of families in West Linn, great adult community, lots of kids. We really want to provide an environment that provides some unique Portland tastes that complement some of the other restaurants that are on the street. We're also a big fan of all the work that's been invested in Willamette Falls Drive. We know that our structure is a little bit unique compared to everything else on the road, but that kind of makes it cool. But we're going to make it even cooler as we modernize it or clean it up a little bit. And then the other thing is just the idea of, hey, we can create a place not only for the community, but also to create jobs and tax revenue in West Linn. So those were all the vision ideas that we had. And then when we kind of got into it a little bit more detail, we said, well, what specific goals do we want to set for ourselves for 2022? Once this thing gets launched, what are we hoping to accomplish? And really, it's going to be an environment that welcomes everyone. All the community members, those traveling from out of town, those in for a sports tournament, they're invited to come and grab a bite and a drink at the Willamette Garage. We talked about my kids played soccer many years here in West Linn, and we would go to Round Table Pizza, the King Arthur table. That was the primary spot that we could fit, 15, 20 kids around a table. We're hoping to provide option number 2 in West Linn, where they can celebrate that agony of defeat or that victorious season. We also have ideas for future events. In talking to Chris and her husband, who have been in the community forever, there used to be a kind of a cruising of old cars that used to go down Willamette Falls Drive. We'd like to bring that back, kind of a cruise-in night. We'd like to create events that bring neighbors together with their children, have something for kids to do, but then a way for neighbors to connect at the Willamette Garage. We do know a middle school is coming in down the road. My kids went to Rosemont, and one thing that they loved was walking home, stopping at Safeway, and then there was a place to hang out. We are going to encourage that, a safe environment for kids to grab a bite, hang with their friends after school on their way home. We also, myself, I'm a huge kayaker, love all of the activities that you can do on the river, and that the Willamette Garage will provide a nice, very casual environment for people to come up after some fun time on the river. And then in talking to some of the local businesses, they've mentioned, oh, it'd be nice to have kind of an informal environment where they can meet for meetings. And we'll have a patio area that can be reserved, something we're calling the pit in alignment with our garage theme, that can be reserved. And then more likely in a phase 2, we'll have a partitioned area that can be used for events. So really trying to create space for gatherings. But to really get an idea of what that looks like, I'm going to pass this over to Chris, who's going to walk you through the design.
So Mary, are you able to bring up the slides?
Yeah, can you see this?
No, we just see a bird on your screen.
Oh, you're not seeing the presentation?
No, just the screensaver. But I thought you were doing a really good job without the slides. I can start. So, we
Thanks
really
for letting me know. I thought you guys could see it. Okay.
We wanted to keep the building, the silhouette of the building very much intact, and just really do the best that we could to refurbish it, to refresh it. But we're not changing that much. We want to make sure we have nice, clean, good garage doors on there. We want to be able to accommodate ADA. So we have nice storefront doors that will be on the front of the building. I did a lot of time just researching colors. When we went to build our logo, we wanted to make sure that our colors were timely and would fit in with the rest of the, the rest of the Willamette Falls Drive scape. So we were very conscientious of really everything that we put into the property. Deannie, I think you mentioned the cooler, the outdoor cooler, and the garbage. The garbage enclosure we want to build so that it will clean up the property, and we want to make that nice in appearance. It's going to be on Dollar Street. We've actually added on the plan, there is some landscaping in front of it that would face Willamette Falls Drive, so that it wouldn't be too much of an eyesore. Since this design, we have talked a little bit about we have moved the cooler actually to inside the bar. That would be for holding of our kegs. So we could remove that from the outside, but we still like the option of having it because the food carts do need some space that, they could use to store some of their food. What I think they call it, the Oregon City food cart is a commissary. So the fence, the perimeter fence, really what we're talking about is the next to the neighbor on the west, keeping that existing fence line, but of course cleaning it up. And then the fence line on the back, cleaning that existing fence line up also. We have been in discussion with both neighbors, and they are both, very open to that. And in fact, they're thrilled. What John was referring to as the front is really, there was two, I think I would refer to them not necessarily as fencing, but more as kind of dividers, space creators. They're not a fence in the sense that it's keeping everybody out. It's more just defining the space. And we did take planters. I thought we had taken planters out of that where we were just going to have landscaping around that. So there really wouldn't be planters there. We did, however, consider putting planters in front of the false stone fronts now on the garage. So I think that was the only part where we decided to keep planters. That would just be landscaping right now in the front. I'm hoping that Mary can share her screen because I think when you see the design, I know that you saw what John Floyd presented. What you saw is I think one of the letters was talking about kind of congestion and chaos. This is not a parking lot of food carts squished in. We have taken great care to make sure there is adequate space between each cart. We have kind of looked potentially at what other potential cities might have food cart codes. I know that what the city of Westland does not. But if you were to decide one day to add code, you would basically be able to mimic your code off of our site because we have been so conscientious about how we've created the site that it could be an example to other projects like ours. Underneath the awning, our plan is we want to have a nice outdoor seating, covered outdoor seating space. But we also know that it's very, very important. This is Oregon, right? We get rain sometimes 9, 10, well, sometimes every month out of the year, but we have some cold months here. So we've added some nice fire features and we will have gas lines that go directly to those fire features so that we won't have to be, having big, ugly propane tanks or gas tanks sitting around. They'll be piped. So it just makes for a very nice aesthetic look. We're just really proud of how the design came out. Jessica has been amazing in working and very, very patient, I might add, in working with all my ideas and changes. We like the gooseneck lighting.
Yeah.
We still don't have it, Mayor, but
I know. Is there a way that maybe, I know you have the presentation, maybe you can try? I keep trying to share it and I know I'm just getting a blank screen, or if anybody on the call has a suggestion.
I was going to offer, I can pull up more detailed version of the plans and scroll around them and actually pull them up on screen. So I was going to offer that. I was just waiting for a good moment for a pause in your.
that would be great, John. And if do you happen to have one of the picture renderings that we had done?
Yes, I actually have all your application materials here, so I can scroll through those.
I don't know if the actual renderings that are kind of more lifelike.
You want me to try to bring it up, Chris? I've got it right here. I can try to share it.
Yeah, you guys all have a copy of the presentation, so why don't you try, John?
I've got a copy. I can try if she allows me to try to share.
Yeah. Why don't you try first, and if not, we can go back to me scrolling through through your materials.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. I don't know what I'm doing. Why it's not showing.
You're supposed to be our tech expert.
There we go.
There we go.
There we go.
Yeah, it's it. Okay. So I don't know. We start
Right
here.
there. Yeah,
Okay.
right there.
Yeah, no, I think we've covered that. That's just those gooseneck lightings. We've, really tried to make sure that we're including, everything that we can. Let's stay on this slide just for a minute. So you can see the food carts are very organized. It's a very structured space. And then on the east side, they would be vertical, but they're still very clean and structured. We've also asked our carts, we don't want a lot of gobbledygook. We don't want a ton of, pictures of the food. We want them very clean, very neat. We want a very aesthetically pleasing site. We have, we want to put turf under the awning because we think that brings in green. It also really absorbs, water or spillage. Turf lasts for a long time and it just really warms. We think it warms up the project. So we really like that idea. But I think when we talked about that fencing down on the, let's call it the south side, that fencing is just really kind of, it just is a space saver. And it's also option. It's an option. If you didn't like that and you wanted to recommend that we move forward without that, we could just put landscaping there. And we're open to your recommendations. Absolutely. Do you want to go to the next slide, John?
And Kristen, just to let you know, there's only 5 minutes left for the presentation.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's quick. So this is just a kind of a picture that we had done by an artist that would give you a little bit of a feel for what we're talking about there. And you can go to the next slide. That's just a kind of a fun picture of what we are thinking about for the interiors. So that this is just to give you an idea of how much thought and consideration we've put into things. And then I can wrap up. I'll let Mary talk a little bit about the.
Great. So one thing that I know that you guys are excited about, we go to the next slide, John, is food and jobs. So let's go to the next slide. I would tell you one of the things that I am really excited about is bringing in some of our incredible food talent in Portland out to the suburbs. And there's definitely an interest. There are carts that we are chasing that I'm hunting down that have an incredible reputation, have multiple locations, are moving to brick and mortar that I'm trying to bring into Westland that are interested. I've had a huge demand for Indian and happy to announce that Platter Division Indian Grill has signed up. They are a food cart in Selwood that does fantastic. They have a commercial kitchen and looking to go brick and mortar, but wanted to expand into Westland. So we are very excited to have them. We are trying to create, invite food carts that complement what we have already. So not really looking for a burger or a pizza place, but some just really international cuisine that can add a little spice and a little more flavor to what's happening in Westland. Next slide, John. And then as far as how we're going to run this thing, we all have full-time jobs, but we plan to be very owner operated. We're, Chris and John, especially just a few blocks away from the location. And so we want to be very involved. We also will be hiring people. We will be hiring a pub manager, bar servers. So, if you have kids that are over 18 or over 21 that are looking for jobs this summer, definitely we'll be looking for people. And then also the carts will be hiring as well. And then we'll have janitorial service in addition to that. Next slide, John. And as far as timing, we're hoping that when we get the green light, we want to be running. We purchased this property last June, and it's our own personal investment. So we're trying to drive as quickly as we can to get open. We're targeting at beginning of summer, really just a soft launch to get the food carts in. It takes them a while to get approved before they can actually start serving. And then we're hoping very quickly after that to get the pub up and running. And of course, everybody here and also the community will be invited to the grand opening. We're excited about that. And last slide, John. And just really wanted to say thank you for giving us the opportunity to come and talk to you about the garage. And with that, we'll stop and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Questions from the board, and I just wanted to remind the board, I'm going off script, I'm sorry, but we are a quasi-judicial hearing, so this is about the code and not about our personal opinions with the project. So just to keep that in mind as we're having our discussion. But any questions from the board? John Floyd, I see your hand up.
Sorry, that was from earlier. That was me trying to offer to pull up the plans.
John Steele, then.
Which I still can. So.
John Steele, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
I'll go back to the questions I brought up earlier. The only site that seems similar to me that I'm familiar with, I think, is the one in Oregon City. It's 14th and Washington, or I think that's the address of it. Across from Tony's and so on. Using that as a reference, do you see this being about the same, more or less? I've got a series of questions, but I'll let you answer. More or less busy than that location is?
I'll take that, guys. We see it as a maybe similar, maybe a little bit less that intersects at a very busy intersection there. So we see it maybe not being quite as crowded. They have more carts and more space. I think they had 12 carts there. That brings more people in. But I would say we would think it would likely be similar or less busy, I would say. That's really hard. It's really hard to say. You know, with 8 food carts and the traffic that we see coming and going, I think it would be similar. I think it will draw from outside the area, which is kind of our hope, to bring some new guests and people into the district and to show them what it offers. But yeah, if anything, I would say it's similar. We have not done a traffic study. We weren't required to do that, but I did do a lot of research on older traffic studies that were down just off Borland, basically, and got some numbers there. And, you know, we're all familiar with how the traffic comes through there on busy times at 205. I mean, I live 2 blocks away, so I see how that all happens. So it's really hard to tell, but we do think that we'll, you know, draw for a lunch crowd and an evening crowd, mostly. And then I think that in between that, there'll be some people stopping by to grab some food and maybe have a drink for business meetings once in a while. So that's kind of how we see it. I think it's, I can't tell you exactly, but that's just kind of our thoughts, I think.
We do have, the thing that we do have that Oregon City doesn't have, though, is we do have a more of a population that walks. I mean, they don't have as much housing, just residential housing around that food cart. It's more businesses. So we have a lot of foot traffic, which we think is good.
Yeah, and that's a nice lead in back to my question earlier about foot traffic or customer traffic. Not human traffic, customer traffic. What sorts of numbers are you anticipating?
We've talked to our food.
Because you're right, it's a lot more residential, so probably
Right.
people are going to be walking. So,
Mary,
what sort of traffic?
Mary, do you remember that the food carts were talking about how many plates they have to do, and they didn't seem to have a concern with how many plates they had to serve. A couple of the carts did a little bit more investigation because of course they have to be profitable, they have to make money, they have to serve enough food, and there's an amount of meals they have to serve in order to be, you know, profitable. And I honestly, I can't remember what that number was, but the carts that we have signed up feel confident that they're going to have enough business, and the comments have been that they feel like the business is going to be a little bit more consistent. Like it's not going to be a mad rush exactly at 5 o'clock. It's going to be more of a kind of a steady type of stream. We do have a lot of, you know, fields here. And so we are hoping that from the athletic events, there's just nothing, you know, if you're in a tournament at Fields Bridge, a baseball tournament, you have, you know, 45 minutes between games or your warm up. It's a great option because there's going to be some healthy options and you don't have to go through McDonald's drive-through. So we're hoping to get some, you know, traffic off the sporting fields and the teams, those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to John's point. We haven't done an exact study on that, like exactly how many people would come in. But the idea is that we have more local than Oregon City. But yeah, they have a lot more cards, like John mentioned. They're probably double us. Yeah.
Yeah, and the concern there is, again, you are, unlike the one in Oregon City, which I apologize, that's really the only one other than 4th Avenue in Portland, but that's hardly a comparable situation. In terms of lots of people moving in and out and so on, that I don't know that that's a big enough concern to warrant anything major happening to your plans. The last one is, and you've kind of alluded to this, but fairly specifically, what's going to make this a unique draw? You kind of touched on that, but anything that could and can bring people into the Willamette area, I believe, is for the downtown area. It's really good as long as it's not disruptive to the neighbors. I don't know this would be, But what is sort of the unique draw, or what's going to be, I guess again, briefly, I'll go back to 14th and Washington, which is, that appears to be purely commercial, which is fine because they're sitting in an area that, so what are your ideas about making it very compatible with the neighbors? And I appreciate you honoring your own neighbors here.
We think that we're so lucky because we can pull from really everything. We have businesses here. We have sporting fields, which the corner 14 doesn't have. We have walking traffic, which, you know, is unique. We have a little bit of all of the kinds of things that you would want to pull from. So I will tell you, John, you can probably speak to the food cart out in Tumalo. Here is a food cart village out in Tumalo, Oregon, in the middle of nothing. That place is busy all the time because there's unique food options. People like to be outside. You know, even in Tumalo, Oregon, where it's, 20 degrees, they like fire pits. And so that's what we're bringing. And we think people will come for that. And honestly, there's been food cart villages all over the place. Bend must have, I think they probably have 15 of them, and they're all successful. But I don't think any of them are too overwhelmed. So I do think just the food cart, we have the bar, which many don't have. We have warmth, which many don't have. We have so much to offer, and I think it will bring people into Willamette. I really do.
Okay, thank you.
I said Scott Irwin had his hand up next. Tom, I recognize you because I right now recognize Scott. Go ahead, Scott.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, first off, I greatly appreciate the presentations made by John Floyd and by the applicant. Yeah, it was very clear that everyone has put a lot of time into this and of course wants everything to move along as quickly as possible so we can bring this to fruition. And there's definitely been a lot of public interest in this for sure. And I think it, if approved, it will be loved and appreciated by West Linn. And the question is like, well, how far will that, how much work should go into achieving that highest level of love and appreciation? It's going to happen if it's passed. I think that's for sure. But then we want to make sure that there is, I think, a good level of authenticity to its design and overall consideration. So one thing that I want to take a moment to look at here is Chapter 58.010, the purpose of the Community Development Code for Chapter 58. The two applicable sections I'm going to go to are B, enhance the historic and aesthetic quality of the commercial district, and E, encourage a sense of historic identity for the Willamette area and West Linn as a whole. So that of course is very broad. It's very big language. And I think you have done a good job of reaching that language. But we want to take a moment here to make sure that we are actually doing something that people could look at and say, that's historic, that really looks historically accurate, and not, well, that looks retro, that looks 1950s-ish, I could see that. And so,
Scott, I'm sorry to interrupt, but this is a time for questions for the applicant. We'll have time for a discussion for ourselves. You
Okay.
have a correct question for the applicant before we move on?
So, well, let me ask then, so what specific research did you do to make sure that you are making it look authentic to its period? Pardon my wordiness.
I think for the most part, we did a lot of the research on the colors and the lights, but the shape of the building is odd, right? So we only had so much to work with. So it was a lot about making it look nice, but not stand out too much where it's like, and then there's this that looks way different. Like one of these things is not like the other. So it really was meant, our thought process was we want it to look nice. And when you talk about enhancing, you know, it doesn't matter what you do, we're going to enhance it. It's going to look nicer than it does. How about that? But it's just dealing with what we have, you know, as far as those western fronts and what we could do. The best thought was to just keep it simple, really. And that was what we came to, adding things that the other restaurants are using, like the gooseneck lighting and just appropriate colors, but really just keeping the authenticity of the building as it exists now.
Yeah, and another thing too, Chris, just to add to that is, you know, the name itself. I mean, a lot of people that have grown up around here know that as the old gas station, right, for years and years. So, you know, even the name itself, the Willamette Garage, has historical significance to that property. And, you know, just the lines of how the lines are done with the fascia boards and things like that, all that's going to be kept the same look. We even went down to measuring the dimensions on the current trim package, which we have to remove. It's all rotted out and is going away, and you can't really duplicate it. But, you know, measuring that and making sure that the same lines to the inch is put back on it. So things like that, I think that you'll see as the construction gets going on that we're really making sure that we hold it consistent to its historical look, and you know, just keep it in line with what it was. And I think people really appreciate that and say, oh, that they did a great job with that old gas station. Look what they've done with it, you know. And there's a bunch of history to that. So that's what we're trying to maintain.
Okay. As
Any other
a follow, I'm sorry. So Jessica, you were the architect. Can I ask what research you did about 1950s style and design for the authenticity of this refit of the building?
Well, I think that if you look at the building, you can see that essentially we didn't really have to do a lot of research because it really hasn't changed. I think most of the finishes are original. The only reason that we're changing some of the finishes on the outside to the fiber cement siding is because there's some damage to the existing panels. So essentially we want to keep all the metal panels, as John said, where there's some damage, we'll replace it. But on the front, the stone facade is actually, it's a formed metal panel. And where that's damaged, it's not really feasible to replace that. So there we're replacing it with some fiber cement siding in areas where we need to. But if you just look at the building, walking through it, basically all of those finishes, whether it's the fascia, the paneling, and all of that, is all original. So really, there has been no change to that building since it was constructed. No significant change.
And Member Watton, I think you were next with your question, Tom.
You know what? I kind of fell into the fact of wanting to talk about it, not ask questions. So I should wait for my questions at that point.
Perfect. So we'll wait for them. My last question for the applicants that I had, I don't see if the board member has any others. One of the challenges that we have with this structure is its non-conforming nature. And we have been talking about this in general with the board. And we have to make sure that this property is going to need a lot of variances for us to pass it by code, because you don't meet the zero lot line. You are using metal materials, which is not allowed in the code. You're using non-wood, which is not allowed in the code. You're not making the awnings and planters and all of these things. So we need to have, I guess it's kind of an open question, but we need to have anything you can provide for us that we can use to make sure we can pass this. It's helpful to the board, because that's what we have to be able to compromise between the variances that we're going to have to put in to get this to go through and how we can justify that. So I guess it's kind of an open question, but how can we address this as an applicant? How do we as a board be able to keep that, you know, integrity of our code?
I mean, I think for the most part, we were trying our hardest to keep the integrity of what the existing building was. And so at the end of the day, that's what we were trying to do. Where we've had to make changes is where like some of the posts on the awning are dented and they're just falling apart. We have no choice. We have to replace those. The front that Jessica's talking about, I mean, it's deteriorating off. 2 of them are stone, 1 of them isn't. I mean, it just, we have to be able to make some of those changes in order to fix the aesthetics of the building. But other than that, we're trying to keep intact everything that we can so that we don't have to have you make, so many adjustments for us.
I guess I would say too, that it is, John referenced the youth music project on the other end of the drive. And I think it's such a unique site that there's just no way. I mean, you would not want to take this building and try to falsify it to an incorrect, historic character. I think it doesn't fit, the false facade, the Old West style that you kind of have your code set up on. But I think that you can't ignore the fact that this is a 50 plus whatever year old structure really also tells, it's historic in its own. It tells the story of Willamette and the history and when that gas station went in, and it was sort of as you were leaving Willamette, that was your last stop, you got gas and you moved out of town. I think it's just a very unique site. And I think what the applicants are trying to do here is really a neat thing. It's basically preserving that phase of the history of this area and the transition from that Willamette area, to the rural area. So I guess again, it just has to be seen as a non-conforming structure. But I think if you look at it in terms of its, supporting the requirements or the desires of the historic commercial district, it will help preserve the history of the Willamette neighborhood. It will help revitalize the district. I mean, I think you have to look at all of those things together. And that to me is justification for approving this non-conforming structure and the modifications to it.
Now, Tom, I saw your hand raised again. Do you have a question on one? Or was that from before?
Sorry if I did. I apologize.
Okay. Well,
but I have some comments to make, but I'm realizing it needs to come a little bit later time.
Okay, right. I see all the hands still raised. And Scott, is that a new hand raised? Do you have another question for the applicant?
That is a new hand.
Okay. Go ahead. I recognize you.
All right, great. Thank you again, Chair. So one thing, that I want to, I guess, kind of revisit with what I was discussing was that, I think preservation is important, but then where there isn't preservation, things are being added. And when you look at the additions, then you got to say, okay, what are these materials? Stylistically, what are these things that are being added? And I think especially in light of this building and the structure of the seating in front, we have to look at it and think, there's so many layers here, the landscaping, the seating, there's going to be maybe some kind of planters, I don't see, but then there's going to be garbage cans, there's going to be all these carts, there's going to be a lot visually being added to the space in front of the structure, the main building itself, as well as the canopy there. So that's one thing that I'm trying to get at with the authenticity, is that it doesn't just look like, hey, this is a modern day food cart pod that just happens to be where an old gas station was. Because then I think the aesthetic something will be lost. And so I hope you can appreciate that. And so when we're talking about the seating, the countertops, all this other stuff that's being added, that's what I'm asking about as far as work being done that would make it authentic to its period. And so if you could speak a little bit more on that, I do appreciate that. Thank you.
I think one thing you would really like is that right now the old gas pumps used to be on these round, they're circular kind of blocks, and we wanted to utilize those where the old pumps were to build the tables around. So we're really trying hard to, this is where the gas station, the pumps used to be. So we're really trying. Like, we have a compressor from the garage, and that's at my house. We're going to clean that. Some of the handles on the taps, we're hoping that those can be like a wrench but I do understand what you're saying from the outside. I mean, it's going to be a change, right? Because there has been nothing there. I would say that a gas station had a whole bunch of, cars that they were working on piled up. And I think we've taken great care to make sure that aesthetically it will be pleasing, from the street and not too busy. We really aren't trying to cram. We could cram, if you've been to any of any of these food carts, they are crammed. We are keeping 5 feet in between each food cart. I mean, they are going to start, they have a requirement as far as their size, so that they're kind of in the back. They're not just like, this is a big food cart lot. And then, really what you see is the space, and the pumps would, be one place where we really tried to, these were the old gas station pumps, and trying to keep some of that character. I even had the idea of putting we're keeping it simple, but, front of a T-bird, somewhere on I don't know, maybe it goes on the inside, but, we want it to be authentic, but, by adding seating, there is going to be a change. We can't deny that. Hopefully a change that's better than, a whole bunch of old cars that somebody's working on.
James, did you also have James Manning?
Yes.
Okay, James,
My
and then
point
Tom.
goes back to the planters and fencing. I'm assuming that whatever goes in will be more regulated by the OLCC for containment of alcoholic beverages leaving the site versus we're putting a fence up and planters in for, just aesthetic reasons. Is that a safe assumption?
Yes, that's a safe assumption.
I think also, just to clarify the front along the right-of-way frontage, the idea that what the applicants wanted to try to create is more of a destination site rather than, oh, this is a parking lot, let's put some food carts in here. They really reinforced to me that they wanted this to be like a destination, someplace that you would want to come to. So the idea, first of all, the planters at the front of the site, it's a planting bed. So it's just basically a landscape strip that's going to help to provide a sense of place for this, so that if you are sitting at one of the tables, maybe you feel a little bit of a sense of enclosure, and maybe, again, a sense of arrival, like we want to go here, we want to sit here, we want to be on this site and not just grab some food and go. We want to be here. There's a nice place for us to sit. There's landscaping, a little bit of shade. So that's it. And so the fence, again, it's just a 3-foot fence, and it's more just to sort of define the enclosure of the site, so that you really felt more like you were coming to a place that you wanted to go to, and not just going to grab some food and go. So that's sort of the idea of that fence.
Thank you.
And that OLCC might actually require it.
Yeah.
And Tom Watton, I think, are
Oh,
you
I
really
just
having
want-
enough?
Yeah, no, I
Okay.
just want to respond to Scott's concerns. And, I'm looking at the site plan that they put together, and there's 8 food carts. At corner 14, there's 12 carts. We have however you feel about the improvements or the lack thereof of the streetscape that we have in Old Willamette. You have 35 parking places that are from the food carts west, which are not being used at all. Okay, so those, I mean, that moves towards liking the fact that the food carts will have some off-street parking, and I know that the neighbors are concerned and things like that, but as far as trying to make this thing look like it's from the 1800s, we can't. It's a 50s, 60s garage gas station. I used to go to Russ's. Russ used to have the place. I have a 1978 Wagoneer, and I used to take it to Russ's when it was in that place. And there, I've been here for 20 years, and there hasn't been gas pumped, I don't believe, in that amount of time. So I feel like there's a lot of things that are going in the right direction for this kind of opportunity. And when I've been involved in a lot of the infrastructure in downtown Oregon City, and I can tell you right now, several of the guys that have taken those buildings and took them from nothing to something, whether it's the verdict, whether it's getting your nails done, all those places down there, they're all happy for more industry, for more places coming in, filling those places. So this place is, I think it's a potentially successful opportunity, and I have no idea how the saloon feels. I have no idea how the cider house feels, but I got to be honest with you, it's this in my mind, it kind of makes sense. And I'll quit talking now, but Scott, I just want to kind of counter conversation, a couple of things. It is what it is. And either they take it down and they build something that's going to house 3 or 4 businesses, and they're on a 0 lot line, and it's going to be a huge icon building, or it's going to be something that they're trying to salvage what's there and make an effort to make that happen. So that's all I was getting at. That was just a counter with Scott.
I just wanted to see, are we done with the
No,
question?
we need to move on to that.
Actually,
But we'll have that conversation later, right,
yeah.
Ron?
Correct. And so we're kind of bleeding into deliberations here a little bit. If now's an appropriate time, I'd like to actually respond to your earlier question and maybe provide a clarification to some of the conversation happening.
I think, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So earlier you had asked about planters and the potential discrepancy, between the staff report and the standard. And so specifically it's staff finding 59 is where I discuss it. It's pretty brief, but generally speaking, the term planter is not defined in the code, but we've generally thought about that as the sort of tree planters hanging under the windows, in front of the buildings. So, which you often see people do in older districts. So that's not something we're really seeing as part of the application. So that's why we included that. That the landscape area in front is more of it's a landscape area. It's not really a planter, it's a distinction there in our mind. But I think if I could maybe help frame the conversation here a little bit more, is just that as we've talked in some other meetings, the current Chapter 58 is not well set up for a project that does not include the scraping of a site and the actual reconstruction of a new building, which is why I think that the applicant has done a pretty good job of framing their responses to the scenario. And that's why we have to consider these as a non-conforming approval. And so I think I would point the board to 2 sections. One of which is that Mr. Irwin touched on, is that the actual purpose statement of the district, which is, I believe the application does in fact support the purpose of the district, the stated 5 goals there. The other one I want to point to are the actual findings for the approval standards presented to the board. In many cases, the application is not changing it's not becoming more non-conforming with the standards. It's just sort of maintaining what's there. So it's not really increasing the non-conformity. It's just sort of adjusting to it, and where possible, making small movements towards the actual approval criteria to the best they can. So it's ideally the HRB would be able to consider this action themselves, but the way the code is structured, it has to go under this non-conforming review. So anyways, that's all. I'm hearing a little bit of feedback, so I'm going to stop now. But Thank you.
All right, so if we don't have any more questions for the applicant. Any other questions for the applicant? These are actual questions. We're not doing deliberations yet, guys. Let's move on to the public testimony. We do have a number of folks who have lined up for public testimony. As instructed in the notice of hearing and meeting agenda, those wishing to testify at this hearing must have completed the speaker sign-up form on the website before noon today. Each citizen commenter has 5 minutes to testify. The neighborhood association representative will have 10 minutes. Do we have a neighborhood association representative?
No, we do not.
We do. Okay. When I call your name, staff will unmute your microphone. Please confirm that we can hear you and state your name and address for the record. Staff will tell you when you have 1 minute remaining. Lynn, will you be keeping that time?
Yes, I will keep that time.
At the end of your testimony, board members may ask you questions. Board members keep it to questions on that. And please keep your responses brief and to the point. With that, I lost my list. Let's start off. This is the order that was handed to me. Kristen Senior. Is Kristen on the call?
We do not have Kristen.
All right. Then next would be Jody Carson.
This is Jody Carson. And I live in the Willamette district, and I'm here representing the Willamette Main Street organization, and I'm the chair of the design committee. We very much support this application. We, in terms of the design criteria, we feel like this building is important to preserve this historic structure. It is older than 50 years old. It is a mid-century modern building. It is part of the historical character of the neighborhood. It has been a part of everyone's life who's lived here for any length of time. We see this as a nice additional use in the community that will really enhance Main Street and enhance the whole commercial area. Since the building is at the very end of the Main Street area and the commercial overlay zone, it's a nice transition from the residential area into the historic older Western storefront buildings. And it basically very similar to what has happened with the youth music project. It is a building that has been there, and the applicant, I think, has done a very nice job of trying to maintain the historic character and really create that feel of the garage, and so we can maintain that character. And I think that, like I said, it's a good transition from the other buildings in the neighborhood, and it's on the side of the street, the side of Willamette Falls Drive, where there's several different buildings who do not fit the Western storefront. So I think it fits right into it. We have a couple of residences, bungalows that have been converted to commercial use. We have the youth music project. So on that side of the street, there's several instances where we have buildings that are not the Western storefront. So I think it fits in very well with that structure. And I think it also really enhances the types of businesses we have along Main Street. As was mentioned by the applicant, I think this will really be something that youth can enjoy, people who've been at the park for sports, people who've been down kayaking or whatever. I think it's going to really provide a different kind of opportunity. And I know we have talked extensively with the applicants related to the kind of food carts, really encouraging them to find food carts that are not duplicative of the existing businesses. So it's not really going to be competing directly with a particular type of food business, but bring some unique, different opportunities in. And so we were definitely in support of this business. So thank you very much to all the members of the Historic Review Board for allowing me to testify. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Jody. Any questions from the board for Jody directly and Willamette Main Street? Scott, your hand's still up. Is that an old one? Or you have a question?
He's got a question.
Chair. No, I have my hand completely under control. Well, one thing I forgot to ask the applicant, I mean, and I'll ask you, Jody, I mean, are you a fan of Grease? I mean, are you a Grease fan?
Grease fan, in terms of what?
The movie.
I don't know if I ever saw it.
Okay, all right. Well, I appreciate everyone's perspective and their cultural influences that connect to the application itself. Give us better cultural references. Do appreciate that.
Any other questions from the board members for Mrs. Carson? Tom Watton?
Yeah, Jody, can you tell me again? I'm sorry, my phone cut out. What committee you're in? The neighborhood committee? I just want to know what committee you're with.
I'm on the board of Historic Willamette Main Street, and within Historic Willamette Main Street, I am the chair of the design committee. And the function of the design committee is to try to enhance the character of any main street. And so we really look to what we can do to really enhance the character and the feel of the Main Street district.
Perfect. Thank you, Jody. You know what? We've spent some time walking the streets. I just wanted to make sure I understood which board you're on. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board members? All right, so we will move on to our next public, Jody, thank you very much, by the way. Our next public testimony is Teresa Gonzalez, if Teresa is there.
Yes, I am. I'm here. And I must say, my phone is at about 1%, so I'm going to make it quick. But you can hear me, correct? Yes?
Yes, we can. Yes, we
Okay,
can.
thank you. I just want to say how excited I am for this project, having lived in West Linn 30 years. It's going to be nice to see something new down there in Willamette. And really, to make it really short, I could say I reiterate everything Jody said as far as, the building, everything it will bring to our city as far as opportunity and options. And I can't wait to walk there, ride my bike there, and meet my friends there. And I just appreciate the group for putting this together and their hard work. And I can't wait to see the Willamette Garage in action. So thank you. And I'm sure nobody has questions for me before my phone's at 0.5%.
Just a quick question. Can you state your address for the record and your
Sure.
name?
It's Teresa Gonzalez, 3491 Ponderosa Loop, and that's in West Linn.
Any of the board members have any questions for Gonzalez? No, thank you. Teresa, thank you very much for your testimony.
Welcome. Thank you.
Next is Candace Scott.
Hello.
Hi, Candace. Can you state your name and address for the record and then your testimony?
Sure. Candace Scott, 1353 11th Street in West Linn. My home is right around the corner from the garage. My family frequents that area all the time. I raised my 2 children there. I went to West Linn High School. I have known Chris Tour most of my life. And the first thing I'd like to say is that these people that are involved with this will be meticulous in everything they do, and they are going to make it amazing. And I appreciate that about them. I think it's a super exciting thing to add an indoor-outdoor space to Willamette. There's nothing else like it, so it doesn't really, it competes in some ways, but it really doesn't, because it's a place where kids can actually just run around. They don't have to sit with their parents necessarily. Sometimes they do, but I think that it's going to be a great thing to add to the community, and it's something very different. So I appreciate you letting me talk, and thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the board members for Mrs. Scott? I don't see. Tom, your hand's still up, but I think that's from before, right? You don't. on. I think he's maybe, oh,
All right.
that's okay. All right. Thank you very much, Candace, for your testimony. I appreciate that. Next is Beth Wertz.
Ms. Wertz, you can go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. Can you
Yes,
state
I'd
your
just
name
like
and
to,
address for the record?
Beth Wirtz, 2076 Osman Road, West Linn. I just want to reiterate what Candace says and Jody too, that we're very excited for this opportunity. I've lived down the street from this gas station for 16 years. It's been shut down, I think, for 10. I'm very excited to see what these ladies are going to do when they open the garage. And I think it's just a great dinner option and lunch option for all the people that live around here. It's our walkability factors excellent. Biking, is easy and accessible and safe. So I can't, wait for it to open. I think everyone I've spoken with around the neighborhood is very excited, and we can't wait. So thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight, and can't wait for the grand opening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Beth. Any questions from any of the board members? Nope. All right. Then we'll move on to Debbie. Is it Louderout? Am I pronouncing that right?
Yes, it's Debbie Latteroot, and I live at 3522 Coeur d'Alene Drive in Cascade Summit. And I also just have a few words in support of the application. I've lived in West Linn since 2004, and I've known the applicants for about the same amount of time. As you've heard, they also have deep roots here, and I know that they have the best interests of the West Linn community in mind. The idea for this business, I think, will add value to the environment of the downtown area and will offer a unique outdoor space for community events. And I'm super excited to see how this project evolves and excited for what it will bring to the community.
Thank you very much for that. Any questions for Debbie from the board? All right, moving on. Our last public testimony is Rebecca Hollenbeck.
Hi, thank you. Rebecca, am I muted?
Go ahead and please state your name and your address for the record.
Rebecca Hollenbeck, I'm Executive Director of Historic Willamette Main Street, and our office is located at 1785 Willamette Falls Drive, Suite 6. And I just would like to thank you all for allowing me to share this letter of support from our organization. Historic Willamette Main Street would like to express our support for the Willamette Garages Design Review application. We feel that the rehabilitation of the building at 1590 Willamette Falls Drive into a unique dining experience venue would not only contribute to the economic development in West Linn, but would also create another location for the community to celebrate its important historical past by preserving the original design of an existing building within the Willamette Commercial District. The location of the Willamette Garage has been an important part of the community since the first filling station was built there in the 1940s, replaced in the early 70s with the building that stands there today. This version of the garage fell into disrepair over a decade ago when the last business moved out. Over time, it has fallen into more disrepair and has become an eyesore in the neighborhood. The City of West Linn has a comprehensive plan relating to the rehabilitation of the Willamette Commercial District, and the revitalization of this building would be a great step towards implementing these goals and policies. Rebuilding the site would literally and figuratively fill a gap in Willamette Falls Drive. Our organization has recognized the need to rehabilitate this property for a very long time. We are currently working with the applicants to put forth an application for the Oregon Main Street Revitalization Grant. The purpose of this grant is to support downtown revitalization efforts in communities participating in the Oregon Main Street Network. The Board of Historic Willamette Main Street voted unanimously to support the Willamette Garages application as we recognize the contribution of this property to the past, present, and future of West Linn's economic and cultural well-being. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Does any of the board members have any questions for Paul? Sorry, I'm having bad internet. Lovely. I'm assuming there wasn't any questions, even though my computer is perhaps frozen. All right, good. I believe that is the last presentation. Did I miss anybody? That Lynn, was there anyone else I missed?
No, you got everyone.
And with that, we move to the rebuttal by applicant. Does the applicant wish to respond to any of the public comments?
No, I just want to thank everybody who commented and showed your support. We definitely do appreciate that. I know one person that was trying to get in and just couldn't was Ann Shea, the owner of Willamette Ale House. And her and I have had many conversations about what we're doing and what they're doing, what carts they have there already. We're not trying to steal her carts. We do plan to tap some of their cider at our place, and she's interested in leveraging our food carts for some catering events that she has. So we both see it as such a great opportunity just to continue to support each other and grow our business.
Thank you. At this point, we can address the request for continuance. If there is a need for continuance, does the member or the applicant have any recommendation or any need for a continuance at this time? If not, we can just move on.
No, I don't think we need a continuance.
And
I don't think so.
staff, any further comments or clarifications regarding this application? That would be John.
Not at this time, no. I think our conversation has been ongoing or sufficiently ongoing, so I'm good.
And does any members of the board have any further questions for staff or for applicants before we close the public hearing portion? This is our last chance to ask them questions. All right, good. Then with that, I will close the public hearing and gavel. I don't have a gavel. I make a gavel. So now we open up for deliberations to the board. So now is our time for us to talk and discuss the application before we make a vote and make a motion. Do any of the board members have any comments? James Manning. Recognize James Manning? James, you're muted.
Sorry about that. So I just kind of wanted to reiterate a little bit about what John and Scott were talking about. This is a non-conforming structure. We're not trying to make this a false front building, Western false front building. What I see in their plans is enhancing that non-conforming structure. You talk to neighbors in town. This building has been a blight on the town for a number of years. Somebody, I think it was Tom, said that in the last 20 years he hasn't seen it pump gas, and that's very true. I'd like to also add that when I was in high school, I pumped gas there, and when I quit that job and joined the Navy, Darren Tour took my spot. So little interesting tidbit there. I do believe that the youth music project building is, it's a non-conforming, but it's set the precedent of what we can do with a non-conforming building. And that building at the other end of the street is a very nice building, and it's not an eyesore, and it changed from a church to a music building. So I think we're have every right to approve this based on what we see here. The preservation of an existing structure is the number one thing, in my opinion, on this. And that's it. And I guess I want to applaud the three owners, John and Chris and Mary. They're residents of the city that they've been talking about this as everyone has, of what can we do with this building, and then they jumped in and took action, and I do applaud that. So I like that kind of initiative. So thank you.
Any other board members have any comments, questions about it? I did, if no one else does, is there's a few things. Thank you very much for the applicant, for, by the way, for putting together a very good application. And I really appreciate the artistic renderings that you gave us to help understand the structure. We've had that problem with other applicants, and you did a very good job of giving us a visualization of what it's going to look like. There are things that I understand we're already in a non-conforming building right now, so we're going to have to do a lot of variances and kind of overlook a few things in the code. But there are some requests that you've made that we don't have to necessarily, and I really need to figure out in myself, like, for example, the brick building that you're going to put around the trash can is not an existing structure, and it does not fit our code. And that's one of the areas I still have a difficulty with that for our board members to try to figure out. I would wonder if we could suggest or put a variance in there, or a suggestion that they use a wood structure, because at least that way they're keeping with the wood requirement that we have in the code. I don't know if the other board members think about that as a possible recommendation. I just know that is definitely one of those things that is pretty clear in the code, that we don't want brick. It says straight in there, no brick, without a variance, and that would be a brick structure. That's one thing I was thinking about. Of course, the middle and other things like that are part of the existing structure, but that and the cooler are the only two things that are added buildings that are in addition to what's existing already, as well as if there's any fencing and planters. Those are the other areas. We don't have a clear definition on what our jurisdiction is on landscaping, because we actually say that there is no need for landscaping, but it doesn't say what happens if someone wants to put in landscaping. That doesn't exist in our code. But it does say planters are definitely something we can't have. But
so, Danny, if I can just understand, you're talking about on Dollar Street, the furthest, I'll say north portion, where so I didn't recognize that's going to be built out of brick. Is that what you were just
yes, it's a
talking
brick.
about? Okay.
That's a brick structure that they're adding there.
Okay.
So either concrete block or so. It looks like it looks from the architectural drawing that it's a concrete block.
Okay.
Are we allowed a comment, Danny? Because
We would have to reopen the public hearing in order to make that comment.
Okay, well, then we won't, but we're happy to do what you guys recommend.
So Danny, maybe John Floyd could jump in on that, because isn't there some requirements? If I'm understanding what this structure is going to be, it's going to hold a dumpster basically, and there's some requirements for strength that maybe wood wouldn't work.
Bill Monahan, can we readdress this back to John, or is that what we have to open public hearing again?
You have the ability, Chair Schreiber, to request additional information from the staff, but it cannot be information that hasn't already been brought out in the hearing unless you want to reopen the hearing. All you can do is get clarification from the staff at this point on earlier statements or earlier input. But if you do want to talk about the something that's new, you would have to reopen the hearing, and you would have to then, after the presentation of that new information, allow the public to have an opportunity to comment on the new information.
James, do we want to address the question back to John and reopen public comment?
I don't need to, but for your clarification, I don't know if it means something. Yes.
You know, there's ways to also put wood around brick if we need to follow the code, if we're trying to make it look that way. And of course, our decision always defaults back to, you know, the building standards, regardless of what we, you know, recommend to build planning. Scott, did you have a question?
Yeah, if I may inject, I do appreciate it. You know, well, I mean, I totally concur, you know, if it's not covered in the code, it's not covered in the code. But we are examining a 1950s building, not you know, pre-20th century building, and in I think in conformity with this building and its time period, brick, especially, was very common mid-century building material. So plus I do hear James's perspective of wherever the garbage container is going to be, it's going to have to be in something that can, put it bluntly, can take a beating. As lovely as a cedar or oak or whatever it is, it's not gonna hold up well, not as well as brick. As long as the brick is, stylistically mid-century brick, and not just giant concrete cinder blocks, then I would be open to that. I'm not sure how other members of the board feel.
The code generally in storage for these kind of containers have concrete stops so they don't bounce off of the walls and things like that. I don't have a terrible concern about what the material is. Yes, it makes sense that concrete's going to hold it in, but at the end of the day, by code, it's designed not to bounce off of the walls when they're done dumping garbage and putting stuff back in.
I mean, the challenge that we have is the fact that it's facing the street, and all of our other dumpsters and everything we've ever dealt with have been the alleys. And it's somewhat because you don't see it from the street, but you'll be seeing this very clearly from the street. And again, the history that we've done with the Historic Review Board is that if something is not seen from the street, if it's behind, we have more leeway in the variances and they're able to just kind of ignore it. But it's a challenge because we got two streets there, both Dollar and Willamette Falls Drive, where it's going to be fairly visible. It's a corner lot. And that's the only one that's not an existing structure. So it doesn't fall back into that non-conforming. This is a new construction. This is a new building. So we kind of need to look at it as a new, I don't know, I personally feel like we have to kind of look at it as a new building. And we will be overridden if there's other requirements somewhere in the code that requires something else. So our recommendation may or may not be there, but at least we're setting the precedent that if somebody else wants to put a dumpster on Willamette Falls Drive, we've got a rule of how it's going to look if that's something to, and I'm open for input. I'm just, kind of throwing that thought out there.
And you make a good point. You could make a recommendation that says this needs to be built per code with, with wood on it if possible, right? And if it's not possible by code, then they just strike that. So you could make that recommendation in the approval order, the recommended to approve or disapprove, right? But and then that goes up to the next level for final.
Yeah. The only other thought that is the planters. I know we've been talking as a board. We want to get that taken out of the code. We don't like it. We can absolutely use that as a variance if everyone agrees that we just kind of leave that as a variance.
Yeah.
Because I know we've already talked about. How do you give on that one on the planters?
I'm okay with that.
And then to address some of the public comments I had read, we don't have any control over parking. That is not our area of jurisdiction as the Historic Review Board, as well as we don't have any control over how it affects the neighborhood. We're talking about design review of it. That's pretty much I saw in the public comment, as well as environmental issues. That is not something that we deal with environment. That is not our purview. So I would suggest if there's members of the public who have opinion that they want to continue, that this does go from us to other commissions. There are other, it goes from here to planning and others, as well as you can also go to the city council if you have concerns directly. All we deal with is chapter 58 of the code. So just for clarification, and all the board members, just remember that we don't have to take that in consideration. That is, we shouldn't take that in consideration. We should only take whether or not the applicant has met requirements of chapter 58. John Steele, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, although you pretty much covered a lot of it. My understanding is we're making a recommendation to the Planning Commission. So there's going to be another public hearing. And we can put our concerns in there. I believe we can put our concerns in there. We're not making a final decision on this here. So I would say yeah, any of the things we want to do, we say, well, consider this, consider that, because another body's going to take it up in 2 weeks or something like that. So I think it's excellent that we have the discussion, talk about, oh, be sure and put this in our recommendation. But ultimately, we're not saying yes or no. Just as you pointed out, and you did a great job of saying it. There's a whole bunch of stuff that's not actually our business. So anyway, that's what I was going to say, in the hopes of maybe moving along here. Frankly, I think just about anything you put there is going to be an improvement.
Yeah.
You know, although whoever it was made the reference to Greece, that might be a little too far. But
well, and
that would be
to the board. I
but
want
anyway,
to put an asterisk and a reminder. This is one of those buildings that is problematic for Chapter 58. So just put
yeah,
a 2
very,
cents in there.
very
Of,
much so.
this is why we need to revise Chapter 58. Everybody, this is the problem. I don't. This has nothing to do with the building owners or anything, but this structure is what our chapter doesn't fit. So
yeah, exactly. And I think anything that's kind of northwest rustic-ish is probably going to be a fine improvement.
yeah, and I should mention that past boards have gone the other way. What sounds like we're talking about, and they've actually stopped things that haven't applied, and basically been very strict enforcers of the code and not allowed for variances for non-conforming. So just keep that in mind. There have been past boards that have gone the other direction on this one, and then I can see where we're going in the direction. So if there's any other questions or any other comments from the board? Scott, did you get your hand up? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, actually, I am glad that they didn't go, over the top grease 50s, put chrome and and make it stand out like a flamingo. Yeah, because they have to make sure it blends well with what's already existing there, and so I think that is good, that it is being contained and that it's not overly ornate in itself, because like the food carts themselves will bring a lot of variety of colors and design aspects, and it shouldn't be. And you should try to keep the building structure itself as minimal as possible to avoid that clutter. So, I do, in all seriousness, recognize that and appreciate that aspect. We talked about the hardy. We didn't talk about the hardy plank at all. One of our favorite things to talk about. In the past, when that has been brought up, we actually saw physical samples of what was to be used. Unfortunately, that is not really an option here. And so I don't want to reopen the public hearing, but I would, and I will trust that the public comments that were made in support of the applicant and the dedication that the applicant has to a high quality product will make sure that the hardy plank they use is not something that people will look at and say, that looks like vinyl. Because there is a great variety of quality levels with that material, and I hope that that isn't a quickly made decision. As with any of the elements that you add, should not be quickly made decisions. But it's I think there's those simple material decisions that seem like, yeah, whatever. Here's a good way to save a few $1,000s. But those will be materials that will be there for a very long time, and those will be materials that will be observed, even if they are just hardy plank and not the colorful side
Scott,
of a
we
food
can
cart.
put
So,
into our motion, we can put something into the motion if you'd like, to have requiring a like for like replacement for the hardy plank, so that it looks like whatever they're taking off, they're putting back on, which is what we've done before.
okay.
To make sure that it's like for like, and that, for look, basically, if we wanted to add it in. I think, John, we've done that in the past, if I remember correctly, right, John Floyd?
Actually, just to compare, are we talking about the fiber cement board by the gas station?
Yeah.
And so I think so that's replacing that sort of simulated stone veneer.
Right.
So like for like replacement would be, I mean, that's a different, that's a different actuality if we're talking like for like. So
But then isn't there a hardy plank on the front of the building as well, though, right? Isn't that happening?
I think I believe that's metal. I may have to double check the plans on that. This is the area between the roll up doors.
I'm looking at page A 2.1, and there's a lot of, they're trying to maintain a lot of the existing. There's a lot of words that say existing on here. And yes, it is metal because it is existing. And it's period for the construction of the building.
Yeah. Okay. And actually it's a fiber cement panel as opposed to hardy plank, like sort of linear boards. So the bathrooms as well.
Okay.
If that helps your deliberations. So
thank you.
I can see that they're salvaging as much as they possibly can and matching what they can as well.
And one thing that's not addressed in here, and I don't think it's going to be part of it, but I don't know if we need to put a note in here, John, in the application, but we've talked about buildings falling down during reconstruction. And, I don't know how we put that in here as the requirement, but that as they're going through and peeling off siding, if all of a sudden a roof falls off or something, I don't know how we put that in there. Well, we've talked about this before, but I'd like to put some sort of documentation to make sure that is noted, that, we want to have the safety of the building at all times to keep the integrity of the existing structure at all times.
So I think this is something I may want to check in with Bill to see if I'm going too far beyond what's allowed, without reopening the hearing here. But I think, and I'll rely upon him to let me know. I think just a couple of thoughts. You may want to reopen to ask the applicant their thoughts about why they made the material choices, about the fiber cement, in their thought processes on that. Regarding the condition, about the possibility about demolition by neglect. I think the applicant, as far as I understand it, there aren't really any serious structural changes happening to the building that could create that scenario. That said, though, you could advise the planning commission to consider that as a potential condition of approval. You can maybe direct staff to work on a condition to present to the planning commission for their consideration. But
so if I may, I think John's on the right track. The ability that you have is to identify to the planning commission whether or not you believe that the plans are in compliance with the chapter, and also any of these issues that you feel that there are unanswered questions. You can identify that to the planning commission, asking that they seek additional clarification. And by just making those statements that you have, including those just made by John, the applicant has heard you and would then be able to prepare to take further information to the planning commission for its consideration.
So we would need to add that in as a condition in the motion.
As a condition, yes. I think as a condition, you would, if you do make a vote to recommend this, you would recommend, and you could identify those areas that you believe there's additional information or clarification that would make you satisfied that either the materials that are used are in compliance with what your expectations are, or if you have concerns of the potential damage to the structural integrity of the building as the renovation takes place, what your expectations are.
Any other comments or anything from the board, or do we want to reopen the public hearing? Anyone?
Hey, Danny, this building is built out of concrete. And they're not pulling anything down. They're adding something. I don't know that that's I love and respect your concern about some of the other issues that we've had on other residential things, but I don't think that's going to be an issue here. If I don't know if that helps or not.
I hope not, although we've had other concrete buildings fall down too. But amazing what a backhoe can do, this driven. But any other questions from the board? Any other comments from the board for discussion? Is there any board member that wants to make a motion? And we have 3 options for motions on our deliberations. Our options are, option 1 is a motion to recommend the approval. And that would be to move to recommend approval for DR 2111 for the Planning Commission and direct staff to prepare recommendations. The second option would be to motion to recommend approval subject to conditions of approval. And then the third option is a motion to deny. That would be a motion to deny DR 2111.
Tom Watton, I recommend motion to approve.
I'll second that.
We have a motion to approve, and I'll read the motion. It would be, I move to recommend approval of DR 2111 to the Planning Commission and direct staff to prepare a recommendation based on the findings in the March 1st, 2022 hearing staff report. Is that what you motioned, Tom?
I'm sorry, can we have a brief discussion before we move forward on that?
Well,
we have a motion on the
seconded. It's been seconded.
And a seconded motion, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What about the?
Bill, can we have comments after the motion, after the second?
You have to be the.
You can have discussion on the motion. Yes.
The motion. Okay. All right, Scott, go ahead.
Okay. So not to suck the wind out of your sail there, Tom. But I was thinking, and we did talk about the garbage structure. The potential for it to either be made of brick to be accurate for the period, or to encase it in wood, so that way it would be conforming. So there was that, as well as the potential for the need of bracing, maybe when the work on the canopy is done, to make sure that the structural integrity is sound, as you had raised. Would the board be interested in either of those conditions being added for approval, or do we just want to do just a blanket direct approval? But
the current motion is a blanket direct approval.
We have no authority over the structural integrity of the building. Just a pretty part of it. So if your concern is the garbage container, then that's something that please continue on.
I would think we'd need a second motion then if we had to add something.
I think you've got to vote down the first one, or make
That's right. If you want
okay,
to,
yeah.
if you want to modify it, you need to withdraw the earlier one.
Do you want to withdraw, or do you want to vote on the first motion 1?
Vote.
I don't hear any withdrawals from the 2 people who submitted it. Any further discussion then on the motion that is on the floor, the motion to recommend approval? And I think then we take a roll call vote. Is that right, Lynn? Or John, is that what we?
Yeah, that's correct. So.
Did you lose Lynn?
I can take the roll call vote.
Okay.
So let's give me 1 second here. Okay. Let's go down my list. Okay. Tom Watton.
In favor.
Let's see here. David Taylor.
Yes.
Chris Owens.
Aye.
Let's see here. John Steele.
Aye.
James Manning.
Aye.
Okay. Scott Irwin.
Aye.
Okay. And Chair Schreiber.
I vote aye.
Okay. I think that's everyone.
Right, so the motion passes. And we will recommend to the Planning Commission to approve DR 2111. Want to thank everyone who testified tonight. Your comments have been helpful. The application will go before the Planning Commission for decision on March 16th at 6:30 p.m.
Correct.
And that is the end of that. All right, moving on to our next item on our agenda is items of interest from the board. Any board members have anything to mention? I'll just bring up, I think almost all of us were there anyway, but we did we joined in the Planning Commission. Was that last week? I guess it was last week or 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago.
And presented our revisions to Chapter 25 and Chapter 58. They were very receptive and very helpful, and very appreciative, by the way, of everything we do. Just to pass that along to the board, Planning Commission really, appreciate it. So that was that was it. And I don't know, a few of us were on the call too. I don't know if anyone else had any comments on that conversation. I think it went pretty well. So they're ready to, and they appreciated all of our time in the Chapter 25 and Chapter 58 work that we had done. So that's all I had. Anyone else, any other board members have anything else?
I just wanted to say, thanks again to the applicant for listening to us while we ran our mouths. And, whether, whatever we, officially, unofficially did, it's great that, you listened, you were here with us, and I definitely appreciate you taking the time to be present and make your presentation, and hope you all have a very fine rest of the night. You, of course, don't need to stay for the rest of this. This is just us being
okay.
our
You're
regular.
welcome to stay too. You don't have to leave.
Thank you very
much.
We're almost
Thank
done.
you, and we took all I wrote down all the notes that you guys said on some of your concerns, so that'll help us for the next meeting. But thank you so much.
It was a good discussion. Thank you guys.
Yeah.
Well, like I said earlier, it's gonna, everyone's gonna love it, and we just want to make sure it's as loved as possible as it can be.
Yeah.
And we apologize for the code being so not made for your structure, but I think we made it work.
Yeah.
On our
Awesome.
side.
Great.
Okay, thanks,
you
guys.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you
night.
so much.
Don,
Bye.
Chris, thank you all.
Any, I think next, if we want to move on from the board, any items of interest from staff?
Yeah, just a couple of follow-up items. There is another quasi-judicial hearing on March 15th for the facade updates to the saloon, Westland Saloon. So they're modifying the door and awning changes and some siding modifications. It's trying to bring the building back into a little more cohesiveness and undo some past changes. So that staff report will be out by the end of this week. So I expect that. Also, too, we're going to get started on noticing the proposed changes to chapters 25 and 58 and get that broader noticing going and potentially start planning commission hearings on April 20th. So barring no major surprises from someone. So that should be forthcoming as well. Otherwise, I believe that's about it. I guess one other thing, we've had 2 inquiries about solar panels on single family homes in the historic district. So the code does exempt solar panels in certain locations if they face rear to, away from the street. In this case, these homes don't quite meet the exemption criteria. So these are projects that may come before the HRB in the future. So both these homes do have to be next door to each other. So who knows how this started, but I just want to give you a heads up that could be on your radar. So I think right now staff is taking a look at the Secretary of Interior standards and trying to figure out best practices and communicate that back to the client. So, or the applicant. So expect more on that in the future.
So John, that brings up a good point I was going to bring up.
Yeah.
Last week on OPB, they had a story about the latest code changes to historic resources in the city of Portland and solar panels. So and that might be worthwhile for others to go back and listen to that. It was 10-15 minute program on OPB the other night. They're allowing just about anything, I guess, was the summary.
Yeah, well, I will definitely go and track that down, and I'll see if I can share that. No, there are definitely competing public goals here at play.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I will check that out. Thank you.
Yeah, they went all the way down to
Portland does like to bulldoze. They like to bulldoze old buildings too, which is kind of outside of our code too.
Well, they actually said that since they've gotten a good committee on board, they haven't bulldozed a significant structure since like 1986. So I don't know what that means by significant structure.
I can count. Exactly. Yeah, the last report I heard was that there was over 300 historic buildings lost in Portland before the pandemic.
Yeah.
So depends on how you call it, historic, I guess, or significant.
Yeah. Or what's from neglect, maybe too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But I just know some of my old favorite buildings were bulldozed in the last 5 years. But that's Portland. That's not our code. But yeah, that's a great point. John, I had a question for you on the code. Open discussion on the April 20th. Do we need to have a representative there, or should we, or is that required?
You can. It's not required. I mean, I believe the HRB and Planning Commission had your communications 2 weeks ago. So, I mean, Mr. Irwin's going to be on the Planning Commission as well. So, so he'll be able to participate since it's a legislative hearing. So I don't see any. It's not. You're certainly welcome to come and testify and be present, and because there may be questions, but it's not a requirement. So that's something you may want to think about, and discuss again on the 15th. So.
Good. I would be interested probably in just standing just to support our application. I know you'll be there, Scott, but it doesn't hurt to have somebody else here who's outside the Planning Commission board.
No, I would appreciate your presence. You bring something to it.
Yeah, and it's possible testimony at the hearing may sort of prompt questions about the origin of something that again. So I think it would be helpful having representatives there, but it's not a legal requirement. So that's if that makes sense. So yeah.
Perfect. Anyone else have any questions for John? Good. I think unless anyone has anything else, we could probably adjourn. Our next meeting is March 15th. John, are we virtual? Are we?
Yeah, so virtual on the 15th, because that's already been noticed. So yes, yeah, the hearing on March 15th is going to be virtual. I mean, I realize that the current track is the mask mandate drops on March 12th. I think council is going to be meeting in person in the near future. So probably April is when we're going to start rolling this out. We also have the requirement for hybrid meetings still, so we have to figure that out as well. We were heading that way and then pulled back, and now we're going to head back to hybrid meetings. So I would plan for it not in March but in April. So, and have we not already noticed the meeting? It may have been in person, but since we have notices virtual, we want to keep to that. So.
And John, just for me, I appreciate the printed version, especially when we're doing quasi-judicial things. It's a lot easier for me to have it up because my computer crashes. So I appreciate that. Thank you. I can pick it up if you don't want to mail it or whatever, but just let me know.
Okay. And we offer that service to anyone and any other board member as well. If you prefer paper, we can make that arrangement. So.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I printed out the PDF file. There's not a single page number.
That was an oversight. There should have been a page number on there. Apologies.
It weakens the value of the table of contents when none of the pages are actually.
Okay. That's true. That's true. If you're reading
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
Let's say 128, so 64 pages.
Okay, apologies on that. If you're reading online, the page numbers work, but if you print it out, so apologies. That was administrative oversight. That's the very last thing we typically do is to apply the page number, and it probably just got overlooked. So I recall us having to re-render the document, and we probably did it the first time and not the second. So that we will not overlook that for Friday's packet distribution. So
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else, anybody? Nope. Great. Well, thank you everyone for your help and input on our first judicial hearing, and I don't know how long it's been since we've had one, but good. And that whole conversation we had there, I think helped me a little bit